Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started here. I am Erin Schubert. We are recording this session, just a heads up. I think Zoom may have warned you itself, but we are recording the session. I will be turning off my camera while we're going through a lot of the content, and I'll turn it back on again at the end where we have a chance for some discussion and some questions. But welcome to our session. Today we are going to be reviewing our most recently released evaluation report, this one focusing on children's exposure to domestic violence and, importantly, how we can promote resilience and healing among children and youth that we serve. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Dr. Erin Schubert. I work as the Director of Outcomes and Evaluation at Sojourner. And I kind of describe my job as making sure we're doing a good job for the people that we serve, the individuals and the families that we serve, and finding meaningful ways to measure that impact. So we can go ahead and jump into today's session. Before I do, I want to make sure that I say a couple thank yous, a couple acknowledgements, really first and foremost to the people and the families that we serve. So for their courage in stepping forward and asking for help, their vulnerability in engaging in healing and providing information to us. And so first, very important thank you to those individuals. I also want to say thank you to the people that serve the families and children that we work with. So my job is to measure the impact of our work, to get to do reports and sessions like this where I brag about the work that we do, but the folks who are actually doing the day-to-day work with the children and the families deserve a big thank you and a big round of applause. And so I especially want to give a shout out to Sojourner's Children's Program team. You'll be hearing a little bit more from them later on. These are the folks who do the group work and do the camp and do all the direct engagement work with children and teams that we work with at Sojourner. And there are many other youth serving organizations in our facility as well. And we'll hear a bit about those. I also want to thank the many folks who fund and support this work in other ways. So a thank you to the Zilber Family Foundation, who believes in the importance of data, evaluation, and research, and supports the work that goes into collecting the data and creating reports like the one that we'll be reviewing today. I want to thank Maddie or Madison of Mad Design Lab, who provided in-kind graphic design support for the report that we'll be reviewing today. So I gave her a bunch of numbers and words, and she made it look pretty. So thank you, Maddie. And this is a virtual session, so you may or may not have a physical copy of the children's report in front of you, but if you do run across a physical copy, you can thank the Brewers Community Foundation, who provided in-kind printing support for this year's report. In addition to those people that you're seeing on your screen right now, there are many organizations, foundations, governmental groups, and individuals who support our children and youth work. Too many to list out individually, and I want to make sure to say thank you to those as well. So this is your trigger warning. We're going to be talking about domestic violence and children's exposure to domestic violence. We'll hear a 911 call that can be difficult to hear, and I intentionally focus the report, and we'll focus a lot of this presentation on resilience and how we help folks heal. But we believe in talking frankly about domestic violence and what it is that we're helping folks heal from in the spirit of being able to learn and ultimately move ourselves to action. So know that difficult things are discussed in this presentation, and you know yourself best. So if you need to take a break, please do so. I want to start by sharing this quote and this analogy, which I think is a really good encapsulation of a bend towards prevention. So Sojourner is deep into a strategic planning session, and one of our strategic pillars in the upcoming years is to focus on prevention. And this quote by Desmond Tutu sort of encapsulates that idea. So he said, there comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. Some of us need to go upstream and find out why they are falling in. I think there are a lot of reasons people fall in, right? There's poverty, there's lack of economic opportunity, systemic racism, struggles with our education system. But traumatic experiences in childhood, like the experience of domestic violence in childhood, is one really important reason I think people fall into this river. And it's the one that we're going to focus on today. I just want to ensure before I'm getting too far into this presentation, can you all hear me? Are we hearing okay? Okay, I'm getting some nods and some thumbs up. Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not speaking into a voice. Thank you for confirming. Okay. So when we speak to our clients, other professionals that work in related fields about children's experience of domestic violence, sometimes, but not all the time, we hear responses like this. He was just a baby. He didn't know what was going on. The kids were asleep in their room whenever there was fighting. He didn't really say much about it. I mean, I think kids are pretty resilient. We kept all that away from the kids. Luckily, I got out before they were teenagers and dating themselves. They don't really remember that much. I see domestic violence as mainly an issue between the adults. It doesn't really concern children. And so sometimes we get these types of responses, right, that deny or minimize the impact of domestic violence on children. And I will say, after reading through those, that there are a lot of reasons why we might get those responses, right? Maybe a client doesn't feel safe or doesn't trust what might happen if they talk honestly about what they and their children have been through. Maybe these answers come because facing the harm that has come to your children is a really hard thing to face and to bear as a parent, and they might not be ready at this point in the journey to think about that. Maybe these answers come out of lack of awareness. But wherever these answers come from, I think we know they aren't really true, right? And most importantly, they don't really match what children tell us when we ask children about their experience experiencing domestic violence. But instead of hearing about that from me, I'm going to play you a 911 call of a child who's experienced domestic violence so you can hear a bit about what it might be like from a child's perspective. Give me just a moment to go over to YouTube. Did you hear that 911 call? I want to make sure the audio is coming through. Yes. Okay. Okay, don't cry. We're gonna send the police. Okay. Okay, now where's your mother at right now? She's in the room riding with us. Okay, so we are swimming together. They're on the way. They'll keep you on the line until they get to the cage. Your front door open? Oh no. Okay, you go along and come back to the phone for the officers come in. Okay. It's not my sister. What sister did he knock off? My little sister. What's the matter? Okay, so as you can hear, clearly there is an impact on children, right? I also want to share too, because I know that call is hard to hear. The little girl in the call, Lisa, is an adult now. This call was in the 1990s. And she speaks nationally on this issue and is given permission to use this call in this way. So I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware of that. But I share this to think a little bit about what this is like from a child's perspective, and to think about when we talk about healing and resilience, what it is that we're talking about healing from. So my presentation will cooperate with me here. So beyond directly witnessing violence, like you just heard in the call with Lisa, children can experience domestic violence in a number of different ways, right? They might not directly witness every single episode, but we believe as a journer, if they're living in a household that's impacted by domestic violence, they're going to be impacted in some way. But beyond directly witnessing abuse, they might see a parent who's injured. They might hear something going on. Maybe they're in the other room. Maybe they're hearing threats being leveled or fighting happening. They might fear future violence or fear that they might be hurt themselves. They may, walk into a disheveled room after an incident has occurred or see some broken property. Maybe a big sibling tells them what happened, or some other member in their family tells them what happened. And they might see parents experiencing difficult things like being very angry or being very afraid. So in all of these ways, children who live in homes that are impacted by domestic violence, are they themselves impacted? And research that's happened in other places confirms this, and that confirms that indeed children are not oblivious to the violence that's happening in their homes, nor are they passive observers of the violence. A lot of times they actively intervene in some way. So this particular study found that nearly half of children yelled to stop, children tried to get away or call for help, all of which I think you heard in that call as well. So perhaps it goes without saying, but experiencing domestic violence as a child is linked to some negative outcomes, right? There's a large body of research that confirms that growing up in a home with domestic violence is associated with some not so great outcomes for kiddos. Children who experience domestic violence in childhood have increased risk for mental health related issues, PTSD, anxiety, and depression in reaction to what they're experiencing. If you're experiencing such chaos in your home, it's hard to concentrate in school, right? You can't put your full attention on your academic performance if you're worried for your parents' safety or your own safety. This is the whole cycle, right? So children who experience domestic violence between adults in their household are more likely to go on to either be victims or perpetrators of domestic abuse in their own intimate partner relationships when they start dating. And then the experience of domestic violence in childhood has been linked to such far-flung things as involvement in the criminal justice system later in a child's life. So domestic violence, not a great experience for kiddos. But I also want to be clear that this is not destiny, right? There are many kids who go through domestic violence in their childhood who grow up to have healthy, whole, peaceful lives, and many do well despite the fact of what they've experienced. And so we'll talk a little bit about how we might support kids to avoid these outcomes despite what their family may have gone through. Before I dive into this, I have a little bit of an audience engagement question, if you will indulge me. So knowing that that's not destiny, knowing that some kids experience domestic violence in childhood and go on to have poor outcomes, but others go on to have great outcomes, what do you think is the most important factor in determining whether children are okay despite the hard things they have gone through? There's not only one, but research consistently shows this one particular factor is the most important thing. Does anybody care to unmute yourself and say a guess or throw it in the chat? A reliable support system in the chat. Yes. Yes, you're right on. They are loved. Yep, absolutely. I think you guys are all hitting on related points here. And we're coming in the chat. A safe person, positive interactions with adults, someone in their life that loves them. Absolutely, that's what it is. A safe, reliable, protective caregiver who's going to help them process what they've been through and heal. And so I think that this point underlies this idea that if we support adults who are parents, we also are having benefits for the children that they care for, right? So a safe and protected adult is able to be a safe and protective parent for these children. So to understand more about the impact of trauma and adversity in childhood, we interviewed a group of 125 adult clients at Sojourner. So these were adult domestic violence victims that were coming for service at Sojourner. What we did in these interviews, we asked the adult clients who were receiving services and support for domestic violence, we asked them about their own childhoods. We asked them to reflect back on what happened when they were growing up. Specifically, we used the ACEs questionnaire. I'm sure many of you on this call are familiar with ACEs, but just a quick bit of information for those who aren't. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's a questionnaire with 10 different adverse events that may have been experienced in childhood. It's things like physical abuse, sexual abuse, witnessing domestic violence, having a parent who abuses substances. So people say yes or no to these 10 questions. So somebody with an ACE score of 0 has had none of these traumatic experiences in their childhood that are asked about in the questionnaire. And somebody who has an ACE score of 10 says, I experienced all the things that are on the questionnaire, right? So higher score means more traumatic things have happened in your childhood. We gave that ACE questionnaire to our adult clients. And you can see their responses here. So this is the percentages who were saying yes in purple, that these things happened to them in their childhood. In fact, the average score for adult clients of Sojourner was 4.6 out of 10. So on average, between 4 to 5 of these things happened to these clients in their childhood. And what this means for us is that a recognition that the folks that we're serving have endured a significant amount of trauma in their lifetimes, even prior to the current abusive relationship that they're coming to us for help with. And anyone who is in this world and knows about ACEs knows that 4.6 is a really high score. So when similar surveys have been given to a nationally representative sample in the United States, the average hovers around 1.6. And we even have a high average compared to other domestic violence agencies across the country. So some other research that was published out of family justice centers in other areas of the country reported an average ACE score of 3.3 for their adult clients. So all of this to say that the adults that we're serving at Sojourner came from difficult childhoods, and really that cycle, what we're seeing is that cycle of trauma and adversity continuing in folks' lives. So in those same client interviews, we wanted to know both how our adults that we were serving were doing, as well as the children that those adults are caring for. So the vast majority of adults that we serve, in fact, 78.4%, have children, are parents. And in these interviews, we asked the parents who had children who were still minors themselves, how those minor children were doing. So importantly, we spoke to these clients at a few different time points. So we asked these clients about their children and how they were doing at a baseline interview, which happened shortly after they were enrolled in services at Sojourner, and then at several planned follow-up points. We asked them the same questions again at 3 months after intake, 6 months after, and a year after. So we followed them over time to see how they and their children were doing. I'm seeing a note in the chat that someone is not seeing anything shared on the screen. Are you all seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it seems like the majority of participants are seeing the PowerPoint, so I'm not sure if it's something to do with your settings, Fran. Thank you for confirming. Okay, so when we followed clients and asked them how their children were doing over time, we asked for mothers to report on their children's well-being and their behavioral difficulties. And what we saw is that children's behavior improved over the first year that their parents were connecting with Sojourner. Specifically, children's behavioral difficulties decreased over this time. So they had less hyperactivity, they had fewer problems with peers, they had fewer conduct problems, fewer negative emotional symptoms. All of these things, which are negative behaviors, right, decreased over time, which is exactly what you want to see. It's also worth saying here that these results, I think, are particularly impressive because all of these parents were engaged in services. They may have been staying at our shelter. They may have been applying for a restraining order. They may have been getting individual advocacy. They may be in a support group. Parents involved in services. Not all these kids were directly involved in services. For many of these families who were just directly serving the parent, yet we saw this improvement in child behavior from supporting a parent to be that safe and protective caregiver that we talked about being so important before. Similar to what you saw on the last slide, children's pro-social behavior, which is a good thing, increased over the year that their parents were involved with Sojourner. Again, supporting their parents, children also benefited. So in addition to measuring child behavior and functioning directly, we also measured other things that were related to child well-being. One of those is parenting. And specifically, we looked at mindful parenting. So mindful parenting, much like mindfulness in general, is characterized by presence in the current moment, right? In particular, it's attendance to the child, attendance and awareness of the child's emotions and thoughts, and then self-awareness of your own emotions and how those might impact the child or children that you're with. So for those of you who are parents or just have children in your life, you might be looking at this picture and think, that doesn't really reflect my experience as a parent. Maybe your experience as a parent looks a little bit more like this. That's because parenting is a complex and really difficult task, right? And so something like mindful parenting requires significant mental and emotional energy, even in the best of circumstances. So now imagine on top of all of the other demands that just come with your run-of-the-mill parenting, you're also worried that if I can't calm these kids down, he's really going to be angry. Or this house isn't clean, there's going to be some consequences for that. Or maybe you don't have a house at all, right? Maybe there's not a safe place for your family to stay and you're worried about where your family's going to be able to sleep tonight. So it's a lot easier to be aware of and to regulate your own emotions when your child's throwing a fit, for instance, if you're not simultaneously on guard or fearful for your own safety or worried about where your family's going to sleep. And so all of that to say, mindful parenting is a difficult thing in the best of circumstances. And when you're layering on top concerns about your own safety, concerns about basic needs of your family, it becomes an almost impossible task. We asked parents about practices that are related to mindful parenting. And we saw that over the year of service at Sojourner, this also increased. And one reason for this increase might be that some of the service and support that we're able to provide to folks helps meet some of those pressing needs, right? Maybe they're feeling safer and more secure. They're more able to spend some of that mental and emotional energy on parenting of their children. We also measured family routines and sleep. So routines are really important, really for all children, but especially for younger children, because building that base of routine and predictability helps kids feel secure and thus more able to engage in self-regulation, more able to engage in emotional regulation and direct their attention as they on the task at hand. So we asked parents to report on their family routines and sleep in their family. And we saw that at 3 months and at 6 months, we saw some improvement from baseline. But unlike some of the other measures related to child well-being, we did see the measure of family routines and sleep get back down to where we were at baseline 1 year into service. We don't know for sure why this dip occurred without doing some future research here, but I can offer some guesses. So I think knowing what everybody's journey is different, but there are some patterns that we see. And a big pattern that we sometimes see is that at 3 months and 6 months, perhaps the non-abusive or protective parent may have left a relationship and taken the children with them and been the sole caregiver at this time. Later in families' journeys, for a number of reasons, children are more likely to have returned to spending some time with the other parents as well. For a number of reasons. Families might desire a contact with the other parent. Children might desire a contact with the other parent. There might be a family court mandate that requires it, and that's more likely to happen later on in the journey. So I'll come back to this point one more time here to say, if we know that the most important factor in determining if children are okay after a traumatic experience is having a safe and protective caregiver, we know that making sure a caregiver is able to feel safe and secure and be that parent and that protective person for the kids is really important. And the data that I've presented so far, I think, back that point up. So being able to provide services and support to parents who have endured domestic violence helps those children, even if the children are not being directly served themselves. In this next section of the presentation, I'm going to shift focus and we're going to talk about some of the direct services that we do have available for children and teens. We, of course, have programs that are directed towards the adult victims of domestic violence, and then we also increasingly have programs that provide direct support to children and adolescents. And I believe folks from our children's program team are on here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I just do the data related to this work, and I don't facilitate the groups and work directly with the families. So I will let the children's program team take over for a while and tell you all about the work that they do.
Thanks, Erin. I'll jump on. Sorry, my Zoom was freezing for a minute. My name's Marlisa. I supervise healing services at Sojourner. One of those programs in my team is our children's program that does the direct work with youth, as Erin was saying. And for those partners that are on site, you may have gotten emails from me about us launching these groups and the different efforts underway around Camp Hope, our Child Witness to Domestic Violence support group, and our Safe Dates group for teens and parents. So thanks for being here today to learn more about our work. Erin, if you want to actually click through the slides, I can talk about them and then just add some anecdotes after, if that's, because I know you have some info in there.
Sure. Let me get to that part.
Okay. So here are the flyers for our groups. You get them via email. Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, I thought it was right after it. Okay, so our Child Witness to Domestic Violence support group, it's a 12-week curriculum. It's a support group for survivors of domestic violence, all genders and their children. And really it's about, strengthening that parent-caregiver relationship and the child's relationship after domestic violence occurs in the home. And really supporting them in healing and talking to each other and having the tools for talking about, things they might have witnessed in the home or experienced as a family. And again, just helping them heal from that. We break into different parent and child age groups. we recently completed our first cohort at the end of June, our first cohort since COVID. So this is a group that Sojourner has done for a long time. We have really developed and honed this curriculum over many years. And so we're really excited to be able to offer it post-COVID. And our first cohort again wrapped up in June, and we'll be launching another cohort in September. So stay tuned for that, for those emails about the next cohort. And really we try to reduce any barriers possible, right, to families participating in any of our programming. So we provide a family meal, just again, to eliminate a barrier, but also it's a big part of the group in terms of building, those parent, child, and just family relationships. We all have a family meal together, facilitators, staff, parents, youth. It's a very bustling and fun environment. If you ever see us and you're visiting the center, lots of fun happening in there. What else would I say about Child Witness? I think one thing specifically about this group and the community that's created, I think in all of our programming that's really powerful to see is just the relationships and the sense of community amongst caregivers, parents, and the youth. A few things that we heard from the youth that we were working with, and I'd invite my team to add anything that they'd like, was just that, they didn't realize, they had felt so alone in this experience and having witnessed domestic violence in their homes. And it's not something they can talk about, or they feel like they can talk about, with their friends at school or things like that. And so, just youth being able to come to us and say, like, this is a nice safe space, or, I feel less alone and I have other kids that can relate to me is huge. And we know that, our work is having an impact, right? If we're hearing the youth say that. And also it's really cool to see the parents bond and create relationships. I had shared yesterday at the in-person presentation, just that, a lot of our parents and caregivers that join a group will be, are often more open to participating in other healing programming that some of my other programs under Healing Services offer. So like our Lullaby Project, some of you might be familiar with. So once parents get started in a group, we're excited that they want to try other things and get involved and engaged in other services. So we had a mom that participated in our Lullaby Project. She performed at our Be the Light event. And all of her fellow moms and caregivers from Child Witness came to the concert, to her live performance, to support her. And when we saw that, my heart was just so warm, because I think, again, we all know the old adage, like it takes a village, it takes a community to raise children and care for children. And so that was really cool to see the relationships that come out of this, and is definitely really intentional in the way that we do programming. We want both the youth and the adults and caregivers, and then the families overall, to feel like they have a sense of community by joining our groups. Does anyone from the team want to add anything? Feel free to jump on in. I think maybe we can talk about the teen group, Marina, and if you'd want to add something about that, I would love for you to. Yeah, go for it.
So we are launching our teen support group. It focuses on how teens can date safely and set boundaries in relationships. It's for teens that have been witnessed or experienced domestic violence, as well as like a preventative for those who haven't. I think it's a really important group. We actually had our orientation last night, so I got to meet a good chunk of the teens that are going to be doing it this first round. And it's a great group of kids. They all seem really excited about it. So yeah, I think it's a really important thing to have, just as a preventative thing, just to either stop the cycle or prevent it from happening, like I said. So that's that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And what's been really great to see is, again, being able to offer these groups again. So this is the first time we're offering this teen group. This is new to Sojourner, which again, we're really excited about. And Erin will talk a little bit more about, expanding and our prevention work and our focus moving forward. And so again, we're excited to be offering a group specific to teens. Again, we offer a family meal, transportation support, and childcare for younger siblings as needed by parents and caregivers, so their teen can participate in the group. And we intentionally, we don't put dates or anything on the flyers, because We're going to be offering multiple cohorts simultaneously, so you can just get families connected to us and we'll talk to them all the details if they're interested. We've also found, which is really exciting, a lot of our families that participated in Child Witness had a really great experience, so they want their teen to stay connected and are enrolling their teens in this group. So that's been cool to see. And they're even saying, so this group is for 14, 18-year-old. So, they're saying my 12-year-old, can you keep her on the list, follow up with us, in a year when she might be ready, in a year or two, we'd love for her to join this group when she's 14 or, any of their youth, if they're not quite at that age, younger siblings, they just want their whole family to be involved and have these resources. So that's been really exciting to see. And then lastly, we have camp. So Camp Hope, it's a magical thing. We work with a cohort of 60 youth. I don't think our Camp Hope coordinators on the call because camp is next week. So I often talk about or frame our work with camp as it's a year-round program that we engage a cohort of 60 youth, and it culminates with a week at Sleepaway Camp. So Camp Hope, a lot of people think about Camp Week, but it is a program that is much more involved and engaged outside of just the week at camp. So the week at camp is kind of like our Super Bowl, which again is next week. So she's busy preparing for that. But we engage the youth in monthly Pathways to Hope events, just to build relationships with them. We're going to be growing our mentorship piece of this program. So, connecting them with mentors, and then just, engaging them in fun opportunities and helping them stay connected both with us and then with the other youth in their cohort as a community, and then helping them work on skills around healing and emotional regulation, things like that help them get what we call camp ready to be able to attend camp in summer. So and really the best part of camp is we're not doing as much I would say like intentional. We're not intentionally not talking about a lot of the things they experience. Some of our campers might be in these other groups where they have space to really unpack those things. Camp is really an opportunity for kids to be kids. They get to do things they might not have otherwise tried and be in nature and just be a kid and free from any worries that they might be experiencing or have experienced in the home. So they're doing archery, campfires, climbing, paddleboarding, kayaking, all the things that you can imagine, just getting out in nature and getting to be a kid free from worry is healing in itself. So that's really important to us. I don't know. I think that just about covers it. Yeah. Marina, anything to add?
I will say last night had orientation, met one of the campers. It's my first year going to camp this year. And I was talking to him, getting to know him a little bit. And he had told me how last year he didn't get to go to camp. And he had been signed up for a different summer camp, and how he was so upset that he even had to go to this other camp he didn't want to go, and how he was so mad because he wanted to go to Camp Hope, and like that was his favorite thing of the summer. So that was really exciting to see that it made that big of an impact for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Marina. Thanks, Erin. I think that just about covers it from our team.
Great. Thank you, guys. And these folks will be on too afterward if there are additional questions about program-specific work. I will say too the point that Marlisa made about community. So when I do things like the client interviews, I start off. One of the questions that I ask is, what has been the most helpful to you? And I sort of went into that naively thinking they would mention one particular coping skill or one particular discrete thing that they received. But the response that I get most often to that question is references that community and social support that people get from being with other parents, who have been through it, kids from being with other kids who have been through it. Because, if you know anything about domestic violence, isolation is a tactic that's intentionally used by abusers, and breaking that isolation and giving people social support and community with others who have experienced things is it's not a corollary benefit, it's one of the primary ways that people heal. And it's really what these groups and camp and all the community that's built around it help give people. All right, so you heard a whole bunch from our children's program team about the work they do. I'll provide some data that's related to these programs. So not only is there a lot of great things that we provide in these group settings, but there's also good data to support their efficacy. So I'll focus first on child witness to domestic violence. So this again is this is a 12-week curriculum, have a non-abusive parent or caregiver and their children of any age. Patient support is provided, the family meal portion, which provides family bonding and discussion time. And then following the family meal, the families are split up into different groups. So there's a parent group, and then there's different age groups for the children. There's a teen group, a school age group, and then the preschoolers or babies and toddlers. And then each of those groups is tackling a theme or a lesson, but just at different developmentally appropriate levels. So, you can see some of the themes and lessons on your screen. So encouraging open discussions about violence or breaking secrecy is oftentimes a big part of discussion, because there often is secrecy and taboo around discussing things that are difficult that a family's been through. And so allowing some open discussion on that is one of the things that our physical educators teach. And then that topic is just tackled differently in different groups depending on the age of the people in the group, right? How you talk about that with a 4-year-old is different than how you talk about that with a 16-year-old, is different than how you talk about that with a parent. And then making a big deal about graduation after the 12 weeks. So we conducted a quasi-experimental study to look at the impact that child witness groups were having on the folks that we're serving. So we looked at a group of parents and children who participated in child witness. And then we also looked at a control group of parents and children whose moms were receiving service at Sojourner, but whose children were not involved in child witness to domestic violence. So comparing those two groups, we found that the group that went through child witness showed larger decreases in child hyperactivity, larger decreases in children's negative emotional symptoms and overall behavioral difficulties. And then in addition to thinking about how children are doing, we also measured a number of things related to how parents are doing. And we saw that parents whose family participated in child witness saw larger increases in their hopefulness following the group compared to moms who were just receiving services themselves, but whose children were not enrolled in the group. And I think that these results are particularly impressive considering that these are benefits that people who participate in these groups are gaining above and beyond the benefits that we know are happening when we're just serving parents or moms alone. I say moms on this slide. We are open to parents of any gender who are non-abusive and protective parents, but it just happened to be moms that was the folks that were included in this study. But these results that we see related to participation in child witness, again, are above and beyond the benefits that are conferred just by supporting parents alone. You heard all about Camp Hope. We collect a bunch of data for Camp Hope as well. So we're collecting data and information from parents, from the camp counselors who are building relationships and working with these children, and then we ask children themselves to provide some information to us. And I'll just share a sampling of what that looks like. So you can see that campers' overall resilience increases over time. So we ask people to provide information before camp, at camp, and then at the first reunion event that occurs after camp. And then campers also, when we ask campers things directly, we also see those scores improving over time. So when we ask campers things like, even when bad things happen to me, I still feel hopeful about the future, campers are more likely to agree with that statement as time goes on and they've participated in camp. Similarly, when we ask campers, I like to encourage and support others, they're more likely to agree with that statement after participation in camp, which is great to see. And people really like it. Parents and children alike are highly satisfied with camp. They give us really good satisfaction ratings and they rave about it, right? They say good things about it. This parent said, My kid came back home with new friends and so much joy, a beautifully safe and supportive environment for all children. Every single counselor was happy, warm, and engaging to the kids. Campers tell us things too, so the kids themselves. So this camper said, Camp Hope is fun. Every year I never want to leave camp. And another kid told us, I love how the counselors helped me with my problems and how we got to do new things. Okay. So far we've reviewed some data that shows how when we help parents, we also are indirectly helping their children. And we've also shared some data about the effectiveness of our direct service programs for youth and children themselves. And so we wanted to provide some future directions, things that these data inspire us to work toward. And so I'll share with you those future directions. And related to each of these future directions, I'll share different ways that you all on this call might get involved and support this work. So the first future direction that we want to focus on is expanding capacity to provide direct service for children and teens. I think historically for Sojourner, there's been a recognition that this work is important for prevention, right? Wrapping our arms around the children and teens experiencing domestic violence now will pay dividends in terms of prevention. We've believed that philosophically, I think, for many, many years. The capacity to provide that direct service has come and gone. And so looking to expand that capacity to provide direct service in groups, in camp, and individual advocacy is a really big focus of ours in the coming years. The Child Witness to Domestic Violence group that you've heard a whole bunch about today, we are aiming to increase the cohorts that we're able to run through that group up from 1 or 2 a year to 4 a year, so that it's running nearly continuously throughout the year. Similarly, we're looking to start the Safe Days curriculum for teenagers that you heard Marlisa and Marina talk about. And then we're looking to increase our capacity to provide one-on-one advocacy support to families. So if that sounds exciting and you're looking for ways to support that work, I have a few suggestions for you. We talked about family dinners. So family dinners are part of the curriculum for Child Witness, as well as the Safe Days curriculum for teens. And for those of you in the nonprofit world, will be familiar with this challenge. Different funding streams come with different restrictions on how you can spend dollars, and the funding that we have to support the facilitation of these groups doesn't allow us to purchase family dinners. So we are in need of sponsors and support for family dinners for group participants. So if that's something you're interested in, buying food for a cohort, buying food for just a couple weeks, reach out to Sherry Swenson. She's on the call, and you can contact her at sherrys@familypeacecenter.org. A little cheat for you all of us at Sojourner, that's our email format. So it's first name, last initial at familypeacecenter.org. And Sherry's your gal if you are interested in supporting us by sponsoring family dinners for this group work. Maybe you work with children, teens, or parents, and maybe you are thinking about clients who might be interested in these programs. So as we're expanding our capacity, we're creating more slots and more cohorts, and we want to be sure to fill these slots, right? We know there are lots of families in the community who could use these services, and getting the word out to those families and enrolling them in groups is really important. So if you work with families and can promote these services amongst the youth and the families that you serve, please do so. Sojourner's Children's Program is going to be your contact for referrals to the program, and they could also help you get the flyers or any other promotional type of materials that you might need. I think they're also open to coming to talk to groups too, if that would be useful. Okay, so in addition to expanding our capacity to serve people directly at Sojourner, we are certainly not the only name in the game, right? There are many, many youth serving organizations throughout our city who do really great work. Not all of them directly, intentionally serve families who've experienced domestic violence. I'm thinking about things like Head Start classrooms, schools, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Next Door. And although they although their aim isn't to provide domestic violence services, many of the folks walking through their door have had this experience. And so we want to strategically build our partnership with youth serving organizations throughout the city, so that we can help them learn to identify clients that they're serving that might be experiencing domestic violence and know how to respond in the moment, know how to make referrals to Sojourner or any of the other domestic violence organizations in our city. And we're always happy to offer technical assistance, whether that's a single conversation, whether that's a more formal training. We want to focus on this relationship building with youth serving orgs throughout the city. And so if that's you, are you in the youth serving organization? Do you want to learn a little bit more about domestic violence? Do you see a need for some education or training support for staff? Do you want to talk about building a referral relationship between our organizations? Tristan Gross is going to be your person for that. I don't think he's on today because I think he's actually at a youth serving organization doing a tabling event. So doing just this, but you can certainly reach out to him at tristang@familypeacecenter.org if that describes you. And then the last future direction that I'll talk about today is an intentional effort or focus on examining other systems that impact children and families who experience domestic violence, right? Because we can control and we control the programs that we provide to families, but we're certainly not the only system or only agency that is touching families' lives. One big system that is oftentimes a piece of domestic violence survivors' journeys is the family court system. So if they share children with an abusive partner, they are likely to have family court interaction. If they were married to that partner, this might look like a divorce where they have to establish custody and placement of the children. For unmarried parents, there are other reasons that they may need to legally establish custody and placement with the other parent. This has historically, I think, been a very difficult part of the journey for survivors. So what we're doing right now, we're conducting a larger research project to better understand this issue locally in Milwaukee County and to identify opportunities to better support survivors and children who are involved in the family court system. While that research is ongoing and we're looking for opportunities here, one issue that we know is an issue is legal representation. So I think sometimes the general public, watches Law and Order or whatever it is, and they hear the whole, if you can't afford an attorney, you will be assigned one. And they think everybody just has attorneys all the time, which is not the case. It is the case if you are accused of a crime, right? So if you're being criminally prosecuted, you are able to get a public defender if you are unable to afford your own attorney. But that is certainly not the case in the civil arena, and divorce and family court is the civil arena. And so because of this, most folks, the vast majority, over 95%, go through this process pro se, meaning that they do not have an attorney, which is difficult for anybody, but layer on top of that having to go against legally a person who has held power and control over you for some time is a really, really difficult task to do alone. So what we're looking for is attorneys. Are you an attorney? Are you another affiliated legal professional? If you have folks like this in your network, we're looking for folks who are looking to get involved in this way and provide assistance to domestic violence victims who are involved in family court. So that assistance can look any number of ways. It might be help filling out some initial forms to get the process started. It might be a brief conversation around legal advice, all the way up through like full-blown pro bono representation for our client in this, in the entire duration of their case. If you're interested in learning more about that and how you might be able to support from a legal perspective, Julie Yato is going to be your contact. So she is at juliey@familypeacecenter.org. So before I move on to the last portion of our presentation, are there any questions about these opportunities or anything that we've talked about so far? I'll pause for a minute. Doesn't sound like it, so I'm going to move on. So this last portion of the presentation, I'm going to point out several resources that we have available for free to be utilized. You heard from Marlisa and her team about the different groups that we have available, so I'll sort of skip over those, but I'll highlight some of the other resources that we have available. So all of these things that I'm going to talk about are available online for free, electronic files that can be virtually used or printed free of cost on our website. We also have a number of printed copies of most of these resources that I'm going to talk about. So if you're in need of some physical copies and you don't have your own printing budget, we may be able to support you with a limited number of them. So you can reach out to me to do that if that's a request that you have. So let me share a little bit about what we have available. So this Children, Family Violence, and Trauma brochure is a brochure that we have that provides psychoeducation around domestic violence and trauma and how that might impact children. Importantly, it highlights a lot of ways for parents to help their children at home, right? Not everything needs a professional interaction, and providing some tips for people to help kids at home is really important and a big focus of this particular resource. It also has some suggestions about when they might want to reach out for professional help and a local list of resources that they can connect with in the Milwaukee area. We have a series of 6 different training modules that we call the Breaking the Cycle Learning Series that are available for free on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is Sojourner MKE. It's in this little left-hand corner of the screenshot there. I can also provide some direct links to these training modules if you're interested. They're available for free on YouTube, and they are 6 different topics that relate to this issue. So there's Domestic Violence 101, Child Maltreatment 101, a third module on the intersection of those issues. So many of the families that we deal with, not only one person is victimized in the family, oftentimes domestic violence and child maltreatment co-occur, and that training module talks about that. We have a couple modules on survivor-centered practice as well as motivational interviewing, which are helpful techniques in working with families that have been through this. And then lastly, there is a module on having trauma-informed conversations about parents and their children's experience of domestic violence. Those are available for free on YouTube. This Safe Place workbook that we have is a really great one. This is for kiddos. So safety planning is a big piece of the work that advocates do with adult domestic violence survivors. This is things like making an escape plan, securing important documents, coming up with code words, that type of thing, securing a residence. That's work that domestic violence advocates engage in with adult victims of domestic violence. This Safe Place workbook is a way to do this in a developmentally appropriate way with kiddos. So it has pieces in the workbook about normalizing feelings and reactions to trauma. And it also has kids write down or draw a picture of different pieces of their safety plan. So picking a place inside their house that they can go if a fight breaks out. If they need to leave their house during a fight, is there a park nearby they should go to? Is there a neighbor's house they should go to? Who should they be calling, whether that's 911 or other support? So this is a way to walk through that safety planning in a developmentally appropriate way with children. We heard all about these groups already, so I'm going to skip over them. The last resource that I will highlight today is not one that we've created internally, but it's one that is really great and we promote a lot. So the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, or NCTSN, put together a series of 10 different fact sheets around the issue of children's experience of domestic violence. You can see the different topics on your screen. I apologize, there's some additional, let me get that out of the way for you. So there's 10 topics that are covered on these fact sheets. They're really great. They're single page, well, actually they're front and back, but they're a single page each that are available for free on our website as well as the NCTSN website to be used. They talk about things like how does DV affect children, different strategies to promote resilience, like celebrating the child's strengths, playing with the child, listening and talking to the child, plus a number of other things. This, the second to last topic listed there, helping the child navigate a relationship with an abusive parent, has been one that's been a favorite of staff that I've talked to because it's an issue that's really difficult and really salient for a lot of these families. And then if you're not resourced out yet, I have a listing of resources that domestic violence survivors in general can utilize in the Milwaukee area, as well as statewide and national resources. I just want to point out Milwaukee Sojourner is a domestic violence provider in Milwaukee, clearly, but we're not the only name in the game. There are many other smaller culturally specific organizations that do this work as well. And then there are statewide and national resources that might be of use. And then, of course, there is our physical facility at 6th and Walnut. Many of you work from this facility. Others of you have been there. For those of you who can't, here are some pictures of our space. These pictures, even if you work here, you may have not seen this area before, because this is our shelter area, which is not public access, clearly. It's a domestic violence shelter. But I feel like I find that these pictures are helpful to share with people, because, and even clients, because, you know, I think when people hear shelter, they sometimes have a much different picture in their mind, right? Like they think of like a big open gym floor with beds or bunk beds. They don't think of this really nice facility with really a hotel sort of vibe to it. And so these pictures can be really helpful in helping people imagine what that might be like. Our reception and waiting areas for clients, our children's programming room. This is where a lot of that group programming happens that we talked so much about. Yep, and that's me. If you would like to get in contact with me afterwards. Thank you all for being here and spending part of your day with us. I will be here. I'll hang out for some questions. Everybody.
Hey, Erin, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Heidi.
Erin, it's Heidi. Hey, quick question. So, you know, I teach women's health at Marquette, and I know that for service learning, I know that our service learning program has students coming there, but I'm wondering who I would talk to if there is something more specific for the women's health class that we could have students come to. Like, what would my next steps be for that?
Yeah, let me connect you with, I believe it's not the Sherry on the call, a different Sherry. We have a lot of Sherrys here. We're Sherry heavy. Sherry Severson. Severson is gonna, I think, be your contact for that, so I can connect you with her. So would this be like a single event, or is this like a semester that they need to have some service learning? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I require service learning for the semester, and it's usually like 16 to 18 hours per week. And then through, you know, Marquette has a big service learning office that coordinates everything, because I'm not the only class, you know, students do a lot, but I can pick things that are specific for women's health for our class, because there's English classes, there might be other classes that have service learning. So that's what it would look like, something that they would come to, you know, weekly, the whole semester.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll connect you with Sherry via email, Heidi.
Okay.
And there's a process to get involved internship-wise. You're right, there's another, well, we're connected to Marquette in a few different ways, but we do have, a psychology internship program, which is the same idea, right? They come for a couple of weeks. That was 2 semesters long, or they come for some hours weekly for 2 semesters. And then I have some connections with law students, but I haven't done anything with your specific program. So I'll connect you with Sherry.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Great presentation, by the way.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Great job, Erin. I'm just hanging on to see if anyone has questions for me, but we pretty much covered
Yeah,
it.
I think most of it. I'm gonna give it like 2 more minutes. Okay. If you have a question now, speak now. Otherwise, I'm gonna jump off. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye.